email that we will be recording this webinar largely to post on YouTube and connect future interested applicants to the information. If there's a problem, certainly, keep your camera off, or we'll make sure that it's not, disclosed without anybody's consent.
This one?
Oh, hello? Sorry. Okay, great. All right, so yeah, we're here for Get Solar Communities Indiana. This is a really cool program that when we think is pretty cool. We piloted last year with Meadville, a community north of Pittsburgh, considerably north of Pittsburgh, and the Triborough Eco District, which is kind of an amalgamation of 3 small communities, Millville, Sharpsburg, and Etna, right outside of the city of Pittsburgh. And done a lot of work in the space, solar and sustainable development. And we discovered that, prior to working this program, we were doing a ton of outreach ourselves and opening up opportunities for organizations to reach out to us in the Get Solar program. But we just do not have the same reach, the same connectivity that local leaders do in the community. So by working through local leadership and collaboration, we've had a very, very successful first round, bringing 22 projects. And we feel like this round we can really do something special. So getting ahead of myself a little bit. So the Pennsylvania Solar Center is a statewide resource to provide technical support. That's the pillar, the bucket that we're working out of right now with the Get Solar program. That's my providence. But we also are a online resource to provide things like informational webinars monthly, information about zoning and permitting, just sort of best practices information for landowners. We'll be hosting soon a landowner's guide to dealing with solar permitting. That'll be really helpful for streamlining that process, because it's kind of an unexplored territory for a lot of folks, and it's going to be increasingly important in the state. We do a little bit of policy and advocacy, part of our educational network. Our Director of Government Affairs, Matt Mahoney, and our founding director, Sharon Pillar, really manage that piece of it, working on helping lawmakers understand the economic value of solar, not only the environmental benefits and the social impacts, but that is a really significant economic indicator these days. And we'll discuss it a little bit, but I'm sure you're all aware, electricity prices being somewhat unstable based on the type of resources that we use for electricity. Adding more solar into that mix is a huge benefit, and having policy that drives more solar can really increase the amount of solar that goes up. And Gretchen Dugalecki is our communication specialist, so she's pretty much covering all 3 of those spaces and trying to make sure that our communication is streamlined and excellent. This is the entire team right now. We're adding more folks in the new year, but we cover a lot of ground with a small crew. Oh, shoot. Sorry. All right, so our mission and vision, we talk about this a lot, and we'll actually be changing this soon to hone in a little bit more on what we're doing. Specifically, we update this pretty much every year, but our goal here is that Pennsylvania becomes a leader in renewable energy through rapid, broad expansion of in-state solar generation. That's a lot of language to basically say we're falling behind our neighboring states. Their vision towards renewable energy is significantly more robust, and ours is quite lacking. It's quite behind the time. We have a lot of opportunity to grow in this space, and that's both facilitating solar through policy, but also getting solar up that encourages policymakers to see that there's a real value to it economically, socially, and environmentally. And it's important for us that all Pennsylvanians share in this. So it's not just having huge entities put up solar, to scale and acres of solar, which is great, and we do love that, and we do want to support that. But we also want consumers, residential customers, commercial organizations, nonprofits have access to solar as well, so everyone can share in those benefits. And driving costs down, renewable energy, I'll talk about this again, it's a means to mitigate those rate increases that we've been discussing. I talked about this a little bit, and we have our 3 buckets. The thing we'll really be exploring today is our walking the walk, technical assistance to the commercial sector. And to date, in the last 3.5 years of the Get Solar program specifically, and this is prior to that engagement with Get Solar communities. I haven't updated this entirely. We brought in 31 organizations that were interested in solar, from 5 kilowatt systems on very small commercial opportunities, and frankly, really for like one solar module in a community garden. We've had multiple requests like that, to scaling it up multiple megawatts with large nonprofit organizations and municipalities. We put out just north of 7 megawatts of solar to bid in that capacity. And we have about 3 of it that's going to be installed or is already installed, some phase of the process, over 6 projects, which is a fairly high completion percentage. And that represents a investment of $3.2 million, at the point of sale, and significant savings over the life of those systems, which, like I said before, is multiple decades. The Get Solar process is in 3 phases. When we conduct outreach and education, as I mentioned before, it's typically been us doing the outreach through partner organizations, through our website. Passively, we do receive a lot of inquiries these days, but as part of the Get Solar Communities program, that work has been done by wonderful people like Kyle and Molly to bring in organizations like yourselves who may be interested and facilitate that conversation. We curate the project proposals on behalf of the organizations that apply. So we'll be collecting all the information you need to submit requests to solar developers, and then we'll compile that and reach out to the solar developers in the region, like our friend Scott, and we will give them a timeline to submit their proposals back, answering the questions, facilitating on-site visits and interviews. And then when they return their proposals to us, we will submit those to you in a way that's organized so it's a little easier to understand. We'll have apples to apples comparison analytical tools, and then we'll walk you through conversationally what that financing strategy would look like. Key thing to mention here, that you're never under any obligation through the Get Solar program to contract the solar development. You're not under any contract or obligations at any point in our process. If you do elect to work with a solar developer, obviously, they'll want you to sign MOUs and do that work. But at that point, I think you've found something you're pretty happy with, and so everyone can be pretty excited about it. I mentioned here some of this, but the goal of Get Solar Communities Round 2, which is what we're in, was to assist up to 5 Western PA communities. We have 4 applicants that we accepted. So we have Indiana, Carnegie, small town outside of Pittsburgh, Wilkinsburg, another relatively small town outside of the city of Pittsburgh, and McCandless Township, community north of Pittsburgh. We've been focusing largely on Western PA because there's a serious need for additional solar resources here. Not that there isn't always need in the eastern side of the state, but there are more resources, and frankly, there's a lot more solar installed at this point. And our goal is that this program makes it easier to go solar. I mean, there's a lot of language here to just say that simply. We just want to decrease the time it takes and increase your confidence in doing it, because you have these trusted resources, and to increase regional economic development, to help organizations develop new job opportunities. Lot more solar demand means more solar installers need to be in your community and need to be in the region. And also means that there's cost savings for your organizations that can get funneled into your growth and development. We're looking for a minimum of 10 non-residential projects. Not that we wouldn't move through the process with less, but that's really our goal, and I think it's a very achievable goal. Of course, again, there's no upper limit, so we'll work with as many as we can. Across 4 communities, that's minimum of 40 projects we're looking to do, and a megawatt per community is a nice goal. Again, one project might knock that out. That's our expectation. If we're talking about school districts and municipalities, that's very easy to achieve. But these are just some guideposts for us to help hone in on what we're doing. It is a great time to go solar. Many of you folks are familiar with the Inflation Reduction Act, and if you're not, we'll talk very briefly about it. But utility costs have risen dramatically. The Inflation Reduction Act that was passed this year provides some increases in the tax benefits and options for nonprofits to commodify that. The USDA REAP grant can knock off 25% of the cost of your solar. There's a community facilities program that's for nonprofits that does some equivalent work through the USDA. Indiana meets the obligation for USDA REAP's program, so pretty much every organization that we're speaking with will have some capacity to apply for money through these programs. And there's other great financing tools available. We have folks from the SEF on. They provide a really great loan program for projects under $100,000 or project cost requirements under $100,000. And that's a really useful financing opportunity. And we worked with some organizations to develop one from Western PA ourselves that we'll talk about as well. So there's a ton of tools out there. Costs are high, a lot of incentives. It's a really great time to be doing this. I mentioned electricity rates. This slide's actually a little old. It needs to be updated because a lot of these already went up again, and there's rate increases probably slated for early Q1. I'm not probably, there definitely is. I just don't have that information on the slide. But one of the things I really want to cover here, put this in perspective, is one of the reasons, as you're well aware, that our electricity rates are so volatile right now is because of the price of natural gas, which is volatile because of things that are happening internationally. And that's not really a good place to be. We're very vulnerable to global changes in our energy supply. And we're only getting more vulnerable with the trajectory that we're on right now. I mean, 70% natural gas as part of our electricity mix for the foreseeable decades is not a good place to be if natural gas can dramatically increase in price overnight. I feel really confident saying this from a solar perspective because once solar is installed, the cost of the sun does not increase and never will. So solar is a really great way to buttress the volatility of other energy systems. And as a ratepayer, it's great for you individually as an organization to buttress yourself from those things. We talked a little bit about tax benefits like at the beginning, but basically these are dollar for dollar reduction on your income taxes. And this is the main vehicle, the main driver for solar traditionally, financially. Organizations obviously have to have a sufficient tax liability, and we'll talk about the direct payment, which nonprofit organizations can benefit from this. Your main tax benefit is the ITC, the Solar Investment Tax Credit. The Inflation Reduction Act increased this back to 30% where it was originally. It was at 26% this year prior to that bill passing, and was expected to, or was set to decline to 22% next year and down to 10% the following year. So this was going away pretty quickly and is now locked in for a decade, which is really wonderful. There's some additional benefits in the Inflation Reduction Act added. There's several riders to increase the tax value. These are stacked. So if you are able to receive a domestic content bonus, that increases your ITC benefit to 40, energy community bonus would increase it to 50, and low income bonus takes your rate up to 60. So there are other components to this. I'd like to highlight these because these are going to be fairly common, fairly achievable riders. This is not necessarily something that you need to figure out as part of your solar journey. This is something that we will work with solar developers to unpack. There's still some rulemaking from the IRS that needs to be done before we really understand how all of this is going to be implemented. But there's a lot of precedent. Everyone's really competent in the read of this bill. This is just a really significant opportunity to dramatically reduce the cost of a solar installation based on some considerations like the energy community bonus. Again, we really need that rulemaking to have a concrete answer, but a lot of the preliminary assessments on what an energy community would look like based on similar programs suggest that all of Indiana would be viable for this. The elective payments, this is what I've been talking about with nonprofits. So the bill provides that tax-exempt organizations can receive a direct payment from the government based on the benefits that they would have received were they a commercial enterprise. And there's some additional language here on exactly the way this is going to shape out, but our expectation is that this would be delivered relatively quickly to organizations that contract their solar and pay for it. So this was something that was not available in any way, shape, or form to nonprofits previously. It was all grant funding or power purchase agreements to identify some of the discounted value that for-profit entities get. Now there's this direct payment, and that significantly changes the way that solar can be financed for your nonprofit organizations. Here's a tax benefit that's not transferable to nonprofits, but it's still really valuable to talk about. The modified accelerated cost recovery system, or MACRS, is just a form of depreciation, equipment depreciation. The nice thing here is that all the full value of the solar can be depreciated on your taxes in the first year. If you have the appetite, you can do it on a 5-year schedule. If not, and again, this is dependent on your specific tax situation, your tax bracket, but this could mean 20% more off the top of that installation cost, which is pretty significant. And this does stack with the ITC and all of its bonuses. The United States Department of Agriculture, the USDA, has 2 really wonderful programs that, like I said at the beginning, you would be, most of these organizations, or all these organizations, would be eligible for. That is the Community Facilities Program for nonprofit tax-exempt organizations, including municipalities, and the Rural Energy for America program for for-profit entities, or for for-profit entities in rural areas or agricultural producers wherever they may be. But again, that would be covering pretty much every organization within Indiana. For the Community Facilities Program, this is the nonprofits. Eligible applicants are all levels of municipal government, charitable nonprofits, schools, libraries. That covers basically the full spectrum. Organizations need to be providing a community service and have community support, which typically those types of organizations do. Those are sort of more qualitative requirements on the application. But I can say this up top, working with the USDA, working with representatives on these programs has been very easy, very comfortable. They do really want to get these projects done, and they're very helpful getting you all the materials you need for your application. And that's for community facilities and REAP. The grant cover up to 55% of project costs based on demographics. This is something we'll refine in the application phase on exactly what each organization can meet, but I believe the minimum is 25% or 20%. There's a scaling based on both population and economic factors, but the maximum award is always $50,000 for these, or typically, I should say. They do have some leeway, but that's a good place to identify an expectation, and it would be based off of that percentage of the total investment into solar. They do provide a direct loan for nonprofit organizations. They have a fixed interest rate. Obviously changes like all fixed interest rates do at the point of your contracting, but they'll extend it out to useful life. And for solar, that's comfortably 25, 30 years. So you could have a grant plus a direct loan cover your operation or your development costs for your solar, extend that loan out so that you're basically cash positive immediately. That's a really powerful tool. They also provide guarantees on loans through existing banking institutions. So if you really like your bank and they are offering a very competitive rate, the USDA can be brought in to guarantee that loan and add a little bit of additional support to the financing. REAP is for for commercial organizations, for profits, as I mentioned earlier. The grant for REAP is just 25% off of the total project cost. That's up to a maximum of $500,000 for renewable energy projects, for $250,000 for energy efficiency projects. They do both. I didn't want to get too into the weeds with this, but there's plenty of information out there, and we can definitely discuss it further and can connect you with representatives from the USDA. But this is significant, and we worked through some projects that are awaiting determination whether or not they're going to receive it. Fortunately for us and for those organizations, the financing just worked out without needing the grant, so they were comfortable either way. So they went ahead and are moving forward with their projects. But the USDA has 3 tiers, so the smaller your project, the less arduous the application is. Though I should say they're fairly straightforward. You just need to provide more documentation the larger the project, and frankly, probably the more likely you are to receive funding if it's a smaller project, because they do different rounds and they try to get as many of the small projects going. But the project we applied for was asking for $250,000. It seemed like a very strong application. We felt pretty good about it. This is a really useful way to finance solar in your region. But again, grant application, so it's certainly not a guarantee, though they do disperse quite a lot of money for these projects. And they do offer, again, the guaranteed loan. They don't do a direct loan for REAP. And one thing to note, that application deadline is March 31st. mentioned earlier, we structured this program to give you time to do this. So if you're an organization that's interested in this process, we would make sure we set you up to succeed in the space. Loan programs. Short-term loans can defray that upfront cost of solar. I mean, that's pretty obvious, but I think it's really interesting to think about when you're looking at financing solar. You have these tax benefits, you have maybe these grant opportunities, so there's going to be some kind of remainder. Finding a loan program that you're comfortable with, either through the SCF we'll talk about, the project that we worked on with Bridgeway Capital and the Heinz Foundation, or just your local banking institute. And there are other organizations that provide financing for solar or for equipment. I mean, it's a pretty excellent way to get to cost positive. You know, if you can stretch a loan out over a couple of years, then and you're able to stack it with these beautiful tax benefits, then you're paying potentially a smaller amount on your loan than you are receiving savings in your energy costs. So this can become a cash positive design like fairly easily now with these additional tax benefits that are available. I've mentioned this a couple times, the Clean Power Partner Fund. We worked with Heinz Endowment and Bridgeway Capital to kind of come up with the design on this. Heinz provided a $1 million grant to Bridgeway to facilitate a pilot of this program. It's just here to provide gap funding for low nonprofits in the form of low interest loans with flexible terms. We are just starting this program up in the fall, in the fall of this year. The Inflation Reduction Act has extended some of our timelines, waiting to see how the rulemaking will play out. But the goal is to identify nonprofit organizations that provide a community benefit, just like that that community facilities program, and help you finance that remainder of your solar in a way that gets you to cash neutral or cash positive, so that your solar array is not costing you money from the start, but potentially making you money from that first year. Sustainable Energy Fund. This is sorry, move my thing. This is what I mentioned earlier, and we have Elaine on the call who can answer questions towards the end, but I just basically copy and pasted their fact sheet here. It's a really, really great loan program specifically for renewable energy and energy efficiency programs, which obviously solar will fall under. Elaine can talk a little bit more if folks have questions about the criteria, but you know, we've had some experience working with organizations pursuing this in the past iterations of it. It's just a really good program with a very long amortization schedule, which allows you to get where you need to be. Elaine, if you want to throw anything else in while we're on the slide, I'll defer to you.
Sure. Our sustainable the energy efficiency and renewable energy loan is a social impact loan, first and foremost, so that a portion of the interest collected on that will go back to nonprofit weatherization program. But we are willing to work with organizations on that interest rate to come down a little bit. It takes away the social impact component, but it still will help organizations that are seeking financing. Typically it's a 5 to 7 year loan with different interest rates depending on that term. Those can be refinanced up to 20 years. And being a nonprofit, a mission-driven nonprofit, we will work very closely with organizations and companies, customers, in order to get a quick turnaround on the financing and get a term sheet out quickly. We're willing to work with an organization, like I said. And then we also offer, as I stated in my intro, the Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy Program. Now that is offered in counties who have enabled counties that have enabled legislation allowing for the program. And the Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy Program is a financing mechanism by which debt is secured from a private capital provider and becomes a voluntary lien against the property, thus the property secures the lien or secures the debt. And then also that debt is billed and repaid alongside property taxes, hence counties needing to enable the legislation. We act as program administrator for that program so that we are the go-between for counties, capital providers, projects, and engineers doing energy reports. And I'll leave it at that. And if people have questions, I'm happy to answer them, but that's what we offer in a nutshell.
Great, thank you so much, Elaine. That's very helpful. And please, if you have questions, like, you can throw them in the chat while we're having this conversation, or we can do it at the end. All right, so the last thing on financing, I'll mention, we usually would have slides covering short-term and long-term power purchase agreements, but with the direct payment, the short-term don't have as much viability, but I will explain those in a moment. Long-term power purchase agreements are still a really great way for nonprofit organizations to finance solar, potentially at no upfront cost, and usually at no upfront cost. The short-term ones tend to have a little bit of both, but basically this is a three-party arrangement. There's a third-party entity that is the financier for the solar and the on-paper owner during the duration of the agreement. Solar developers typically bring in their own financing organization to work with, or are able to finance themselves. But the reason this is really valuable is they can commodify those tax benefits. So part of their cost is defrayed by virtue of acquiring all of the tax benefits that an organization would be receiving if they were a commercial organization. And they, in return, for no money down, they give you a reduced cost for your electricity typically. And that is scheduled over 25 to 30 years. They're responsible for the operations and maintenance to ensure that that system is running at its full value, because they're obviously also implicated in the value of that solar. And then sometimes you have a buyout option, or you can negotiate a buyout option over different terms that would allow you to spend a dollar amount to buy out that power purchase agreement and become the full owner and receive the full benefit after a certain amount of time. Minimum would be, again, 5 full tax years, as the IRS's requirement for conferring ownership and not clawing back some of those tax benefits they receive. And this is an example of a project that we've worked on, one of our Get Solar rounds that's completed operational right now. Community College of Allegheny County, their North Campus this is the aerial view of the solar design. The solar is up and running, fully installed, and typically I have slides showing that, but I think I excised those from this presentation. But 540 kilowatts, and that expected savings before rate increases was just shy of $800,000, and now it's probably significantly more. This is a really good deal for the community college. They didn't want to be responsible for the operations and maintenance, like they didn't want to have to divert any of their resources to that, though it's not necessarily significant to do that, and you could always contract that as part of your solar array. But they didn't want to worry about it. They wanted to work on what they do as an educator. They were looking to save some money on their electricity and to fix the value, the rate of their electricity, which, again, volatility in the electricity market, it's really valuable to know you have a fixed rate. A lot of organizations on this call probably routinely work with supply contractors to fix that rate in for 2 to 6 years at a time. But once your contract's up, you're subject to what the market rate is, and that is typically not less than what it was when you started. So solar is a way to fix that value over a much longer time, whether you're installing it and just receiving the full benefit, or if you're working a power purchase agreement because your kilowatt rate is locked in. All of this is to say that solar can be simple. Like, going solar can be easy, and we want to facilitate that. Our role as an unbiased nonprofit organization is to just connect you with the resources you need to do this well, and explain everything that you need, taking the time and energy off of you and your facility, that precious time that you can divert into other things, and we'll get the work done, present you with your options, and then you can take it from there, and we'll always be available for you as a trusted resource. but again, there's no obligations, no contracts to participate. We're a nonprofit, foundation funded. We have support through other entities within the solar community. We're trying to do this to be a supportive organization. One thing, if we do work with you, you do complete a solar project, we do ask the solar developers to contribute 1.5% of that project cost to the Solar Center as a donation for bringing solar ready projects to the door. But again, that is not implicated in any way on your cost to participate in the program. We waived what was the modest $75 or $50 application fee as part of the communities program. So the next steps, pretty simple. Submit an application. Monday, January 16th is the deadline so that we can get these projects into queue in time for these funding deadlines. That's as simple as this form I'm showing you right now. There's 4 pages to it. It's pretty much just assessing who you are as an organization and what your needs are, information about your roof, blueprints, those kind of things are really helpful. But what we really need is a completed application and a recent electricity bill documenting 12 months of your usage, which for pretty much all of you folks is just a copy of your recent electricity bill. Have all that information, but that's important for us to know what your savings opportunities are, how much you're paying, how much you're using, so the solar developers can align your potential solar with what you're actually using and what you need. Applications can be found on our website, pasolarcenter.org/getsolar. I'll show you in the next slide. This is what it would look like if you click through. See, we have a little Indiana landing page for you folks. Specifically, anywhere in the Get Solar communities will get you the tools you need, but we try to have this website host information specific to you and what's going on in your community. So that application and associated materials are available there. Just click through that, or you can reach out to me directly at leo@pasolarcenter.org to ask questions, or we can set up time to discuss. I'm happy to talk with any of you about your project, Stan. I know certain organizations, municipal school districts, that can be a lot more involved conversation. We do actually have a program. We're working with another national nonprofit on solar schools. So that's something I can wheel you to. But if you've already sort of have consensus built within your organization, it's easy to just come to us and we can kind of work through what a high level assessment of that would be. You can also go to our website, that same process, and fill out a pre-qualification survey demonstrated here on the left. It's basically just a very simple questionnaire, and I can take a look at your property and draw, cursory solar estimation. If you provide those electricity bills, then I can give you some sense of where your savings would be, your profile, at a really high level, just to indicate, what your situation is and where you can go. If you have a roof with not a lot of life on it, then that's something that we'd want to talk about and see what your plans are. You always want to have your roof, the health of your roof and the solar aligned, because the minute you'd have to take that solar off to replace your roof in 5, 10, 15, even 20 years, you really are killing a lot of the value of the solar to spend that money. Right, and after you've submitted your application, after we reach that January 16th date, what this is going to look like is we're going to work with solar developers on your behalf. We'll submit that solar request for proposals to these folks. We'll organize site visits, answer their questions, get them the materials they need. We'll make sure they all have the same information. They're all working off of an unbiased platform, and they'll submit solar proposals to us, which we will then put together in some apples to apples document. This is a version of an old document that we're using, and find that process a bit. But basically, we'll show you at a high level what their values are, cost, install, expected cash flow. You'll get the complete proposal submitted, and we'll try to identify any of the nuance between the proposals that would not just necessarily look at cost and savings values. And we'll facilitate opportunities for you to interview them and ask appropriate questions that will get you closer to the answers you need. Again, this process can take, for some organizations, can take years, depending on your situation, but in an ideal world, this would not be super involved. We will be there with you as long as you need us, though. And important dates, as we mentioned, the January 16th deadline. That's for applications for organizations, businesses, nonprofits, municipalities, whatever, landowners. We're going to try to get that RFP out as quickly as possible, and our target here is January 23rd. So you can see there's basically a week in between us receiving the applications and us submitting this to solar developers. So we really do need all of those materials on that date for us to get your project in the queue and get it out to where it needs to go in time. Then solar developers have a little over a month, about five to 6 weeks, depending on the community. And we've tightened this one up for the purposes of getting those REAP applications in time, but we'll give the solar developers advance notice and work with them right up until the point where we submit the RFP for them to know more or less what they can expect, and make sure that we can get this proposal turned around quickly. And then I have here that March 31st deadline for USDA REAP. Not necessarily required, of course, for anybody to submit an application for it, but I would strongly recommend, if you do qualify, that we work towards getting that application in. I think with REAP, as I mentioned before, you have this March 31st deadline. There are other funding rounds, but if you can get into that first round, it really sets you up to maximize your opportunity to receive the grant, and then you could potentially begin construction or begin contracting further down the road. Once you've applied to REAP and received certification of your application, then you are able to move forward. But no, I don't think anybody here would be able to get construction started, under ideal conditions in that timeline. So it's not really a concern. All right, this is my contact information and our website, and this is a great opportunity for us to do a little bit of question and answer for the remaining. I guess we have quite a lot of time, so we'll do Q&A for as long as you folks want to stay on and talk about it, and then if we don't have any more questions, we'll get out a little early. So I will. Oh yeah, so Renee posted some information in the chat. Folks want to learn a little more about the SEF. Do we have any questions about any of the topics we talked about, or solar in general, or just your project in general? Happy to have some discussions. It would probably be beneficial for other organizations to hear the type of questions that you have.
Quick question, Leo.
Yeah.
If there would be, since the River Valley School District has 2 separate campuses, could that be rolled into one application, since there would be 2 potential different site locations? And how much advantage would there be for the stadium complex, for example, that's under consideration to be built as a 3rd location for potential solar farming?
Those are great questions. Yeah, so absolutely, any number of properties that you want to include under your application is totally fine with us. And I would highly recommend exploring your maximum solar capacity all at once, just so you can have as much information to move forward with your decision. And obviously, you probably want to hone in on a plan before getting too deep in your administration, but we can help you do that. One thing I didn't mention earlier, sometimes I discuss net metering, but I didn't want to extend too much of our time, provide a lot of opportunity for these kind of questions. But net metering is the program that allows organizations through utility to receive their full solar benefit, even if they are not using in real time the electricity being generated. So a lot of folks are probably familiar with this, but you basically run a meter backwards. The utility company trues you up based on how much you generate, how much you consume, up to 100% on the net metering. But another feature of the net metering that is relevant is that you have a 2-mile radius that you can have solar on site to where the energy is actually being credited in the bill. So what I mean by that is, if you do have a field or a piece of property within 2 miles of a facility, you could have the solar go into that field, either because you own the land or you restructure a long-term lease to lease that land to put the solar up, and you can credit it to any of the bills within that 2-mile radius that you're the owner of. So, I hope this answers your question, but basically I'd want to look at all your properties, see the best place for the solar to go. And I imagine they're all within that, or you very likely could scheme them within that range so that you're putting the solar where it's most economically beneficial for you, and it would be attached to whatever bills you need to be attached to reduce your costs. Does that get out your answer, Jeff?
Yeah, that does, and I'll be able to relay that to the administration. And the other question I did have is south, southwest, best direction to point the panels or install the panels for maximum benefit?
Yeah. So that, this is again something that will be developed in the proposals. But yeah, typically, I mean, your southern exposure, a nice flat roof with full southern exposure is ideal. East-west orientations aren't bad, depending on the inclination of the roof. But obviously, your north side, if you have a pitched roof and you have solar on the north side of that, it's just not going to be as effective economically from the production standpoint. But there are cases certainly where east-west orientations with the lower pitch can make sense on both sides. But again, the ideal situation is you have land and it has a gentle south slope, or if it's totally flat, that's great. And the modules can be oriented at that perfect inclination. And a lot of solar developers right now are using what's called a bifacial solar module. So there's some opportunity for light to pour through transparent areas in the solar module, so that light can bounce off of a reflective surface and be captured on the other side of the module, which is also capable of converting light into voltaic energy. So there's some orientation considerations with that, with the reflective surface. So if you have a white TPO membrane on a roof, then they might be oriented slightly different than they would have been otherwise. That's not really where my expertise is, but certainly if your land is at all accessible, they'll figure it out.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Leo, does the application commit us to anything?
No, not from our standpoint. Certainly if you want to use this program as an opportunity to build consensus and have encouragement in your organization, as it means like, let's do this because we're getting the help, that's great. But you submit an application, we submit this RFP on your behalf, we go through these proposals, and you decide it doesn't make sense for you to go solar, that's fine. I think knowing your solar potential, knowing what your opportunities are economically, is really valuable for any organization. And I consider to some extent the program successful just by facilitating that piece. But yeah, the application is not contractual. There's no obligation. I mean, we'd obviously would like, if you submit an application, for you to at least go through this whole process, right? And if we're going to be doing this work on your behalf, at least give us the materials to get your proposals, and please review them earnestly. But yeah, you're not obliged to do anything.
Okay, yeah, because I mean, that would be like my board timing doesn't work, but we've had a lot of conversations about solar in the past, and I've had other firms come out to look at it, but we've never actually gotten anything in hand that we've even been able to review from any of those other entities. And so, my board doesn't have an issue with us, submitting an application to go through this process to get the information so that we can actually make a decision. But at this, I don't feel like at this point, at this juncture, that we're making any real decision, because it really falls into the economics of what is feasible on our building or on the property that we have. And, does that make sense?
Yeah. I think that's a really good place to be. I mean, it's hard to always say this to organizations, like, how can you decide whether or not you want to explore solar if you haven't seen proposals? You literally don't know what's available to you. And if you see something that's really strong and you like it a lot, then you're working from a much more useful place materially. So that's why we structure this program. We want to make it very easy to go through it. Again, we're going to be doing pretty much all the work up until a certain point. So that way you can kind of just turn around to your board and say, we're not doing anything, we're getting these proposals, then we can decide where we go. But at least we have information to move forward that's useful. We're not just guessing that solar would or would not be good for us, and then we're not expending the resources as an organization to explore it, let alone like who do you reach out to, right? So
right,
these are things that we're trying to facilitate and make easier for you.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you.
Another question I just thought of, Leo, what in the best case and worst case scenario, if the district would be the owner of the system, would be the ROI, would you think, not knowing all the variables that would be taken into consideration versus having a privateer then provide the electrical discount?
Yeah, so that is very challenging to say without seeing your electricity rate and knowing where you are. If you're, I imagine your district's in a supply contract. I don't know if you have a sense of when it's expiring.
That I don't know. That would be a question for the business manager that I don't have access to at this time.
Okay, but and those are things that are pretty easy to explore. I will say this, like with the power purchase agreement, I would imagine based on other proposals we're seeing regionally, there's a very good chance that just with the power purchase agreement, you could get to a kilowatt hour rate that is less than what you would be doing with a renewed supply contract right now. I'm pretty confident in that because, and again, it depends. Like if you have a scalable solar opportunity, if you can put up, even up to a megawatt, but 2 or 3 megawatts, which is where your net metering is capped, you could very easily get to just the scale economics of a very nice power purchase agreement that gets you underneath your cost. With the Inflation Reduction Act, if you're looking for cash purchases on solar and then financing it, which a lot of schools are now because the incentives are so strong potentially, that's a very different conversation about ROI because it's dependent on how, do you want to bond money? School districts can do really well. Does it make sense for you to do that? What's the bonded rate? But without knowing anything about your school, I can tell you that there's a very, very good chance that we could find something that makes sense, if not immediately, in short term, because where electricity rates are going. We were finding competitive power purchase agreements for organizations when it was 5-6 cents kilowatt hour, and the price to compare in a lot of the utilities now is 14 cents, 12 cents. So even if you are able to bargain a very good rate, which school districts usually are, is it going to be 60% of the price to compare, 70? And once we're in that space, the cost on installing the solar hasn't changed, really. I mean, there's obviously always market variability there too, but you'll know it when you're working with solar developers and their proposals. But the utility rates change. Solar is not getting any more expensive. I mean, it's the same solar we were installing yesterday. So I would expect pretty competitive opportunities, to be honest.
Okay.
I mean, for just for what it's worth, we're working with a school on the eastern side of the state that had a locked-in 3 cent per kilowatt hour, just north of 3 cents, which is extremely low. That's just unimaginably low, and for a lot of organizations, their supply contract's over next year. They expect that to at least double. They're looking at solar as a way to kind of insulate from these future shocks because if you do a solar power purchase agreement for 28 years, that's a fixed price for 28 years. Usually there'll be some kind of fixed escalator, so it'll go up 1 or 2%, but you know what it's going to be. Either this 6 years at a time or 5 years at a time is really subject to where the market is. And I don't personally think that electricity really could ever go down. I mean, it never has, and I don't know what that market condition would look like where electricity rates just abruptly start declining and stay down. But this is why you explore these things, because you're hedging against that potential. Sorry if that was a long-winded answer.
Long-winded answers often answer the question.
Yeah, I'm wary of making this too simple, but the nice thing is the process really unearths what your values are, and you just need to build consensus within your organization to go through the process. Hey folks, anybody else have questions? And again, I'm happy to make time available for folks between now and the application deadline to discuss your projects or any of your other questions if you can't think of anything right now, specifically about what we do and how we do it, and we can definitely talk about solar financing. If you submit those pre-qualifications, that's a really useful way for us to at least get a conversation going about what solar could look like for you. So you send me addresses, you can send me electricity bills. We can get a sense of where your opportunities are at a high level.
When do you think, Leo, that you'll have the recording available to send the link out to us?
Oh, great question. Yeah, I would really expect to have that up on Monday of next week. We want to give a maximum time before the holiday because we know folks will be getting out, but all I have to do really is just compress the file and load up on YouTube. We won't really be doing any editing on it. So that should be available. I mean, maybe even this afternoon, but I would trust on Monday.
Okay.
And it's worth noting, I mean, it probably won't be super helpful for your application deadline, but we do have another Get Solar webinar for one of the communities that applied on the 13th. So it gives you 3 days prior to a completed application to sit in on another conversation very similarly. We'll be covering slightly different things, as I don't believe they are REAP area, but just a heads up that that's a possibility as well. If there's something you were looking for on our website and you don't find it, or it's not easy to find, your opinion, please reach out. Again, I'm very, very happy to talk to folks who are interested in going solar. Okay, folks. Well, we're at 2:05, so budgeted quite a lot of time, which is nice. I'm not over for once. So if you do have questions, reach out to me, give me a call, email me, and I'll make time to talk to you. Really grateful for all of you joining the presentation, and I'm really excited to see where we can go in the future with solar in Indiana. Again, Kyle, Molly, and the teams that you work with, so grateful for all your support and really making this happen. It's really exciting to see what we can do in your community. I'll give you a moment to.
Of course, yeah. Thank you as well, Leo. You're doing a lot of work as well. I know you don't want to pat yourself on the back, but I'll pat it for you. So thank you for what you guys are doing as well.
Yeah, likewise. We can pat each other's backs. I like that.
Wonderful.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much.
Leo, before you go,
Yeah, sure.
There's a bunch of resources of people who when they introduced themselves had resources and mentioned resources.
Yours.
Can you circulate those contact information and what they do?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can send you a PDF of this presentation as well, if that's helpful.
Well, the PDF would be useful, but you got people like Molly who I happen to know, but you also have other folks that introduce themselves that have other programs, and so being able to not only reach you but to reach them would be very useful for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some information in the chat, but I would happily connect everybody here with everybody else that's on the call. If you do not want to have your information shared, just your name, your title, and your email, let me know. I'll give some folks time to do that. And then otherwise I can share that with everybody so you can connect, because part of this process is connecting folks in the region who are interested in solar. You will have a lot of shared experiences through this, and that would be helpful. And then certainly there's the resources like the SEF, and I can connect you with some folks representing REAP that we couldn't have on the call today. That would be really useful.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Oh yeah, thank you. All right, folks, no other questions then. I will end the call. Enjoy your weekend. If anybody's off next week, enjoy your holiday. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Leo. Take care.